When was the last time you did something for the first time? You remember that feeling of hesitation. Maybe you're not ready. Perhaps you're not good enough. You doubt yourself. It's a long road ahead. And right now you think, safe is a good place to be. You take a step back, but in doing so, you see the whole picture. You remember the stakes you were brave enough to take. So you shout at the unknown no longer, because you are your own master. You rise up because you know you're not alone. Because you stand on the shoulders of the ones before you. And through them you realize you are more afraid of not trying than failing. They hold your hand, lead you to the peak of your potential. And once on top, you take the leap and do it. The first time you flew and tasted freedom. The first time you went the extra mile and never looked back. The first time you understood that something so small could change the course of your future. The first time you put yourself first. At First Metro Asset, we value you and your achievements. As we navigate through this better normal together, we are here to help you cherish your firsts and make those moments last.
In order to make our annual shareholders meeting event as successful and smooth flowing as possible, we need your full cooperation and adherence to the following guidelines. This ASM is being recorded. Attendance's video and microphones are disabled by the host during the session to avoid interruptions. Due to logistical limitations of the meeting conducted virtually, open forum or discussion will not be possible during the meeting. However, stockholders may raise any relevant questions limited to the annual report by sending an email to asm@fami.com.ph. Any relevant questions or comment received via email shall be properly acknowledged, noted, and addressed accordingly. Thank you.
Heavenly Father, we come to you today asking for guidance, wisdom, and support as we gather once again for the annual stockholders meeting. Help us to engage in a meaningful discussion. Fill us with your grace, Lord God, as we make right decisions, and continue to remind us that all that we do here today, all that we accomplish, is for the pursuit for the greater glory of God. May your goodness and love be present amongst us today. Come bless our academy, our board of directors, our president, the officers, the FAMI family, our partners, and our shareholders with unity, hope, and vision. We ask these things in your most holy name. Amen.
Welcome everyone to the 2021 First Metro Asset Management's annual stockholders meeting of mutual funds. Present on this event are the board of directors of First Metro Save and Learn Philippine Index Fund, Inc., First Metro Consumer Fund on MSCI Philippines IMI, Inc., First Metro Save and Learn Equity Fund, Inc., First Metro Save and Learn Fixed Income Fund, Inc., First Metro Save and Learn Balanced Fund, Inc., First Metro Save and Learn Money Market Fund, Inc., First Metro Save and Learn Dollar Bond Fund, Inc., and First Metro Asia Focus Equity Fund, Inc. Additional reminders to our shareholders. Shareholders who have completed the pre-registration requirements are qualified to vote. When the poll questions are launched, which will be flashed on your screen, you may cast your vote on the proposed resolutions by clicking your choice from the available options, then click Submit. Results of the preliminary voting will be presented after each poll, and final results will be included in the minutes of the meeting. I am now turning over the digital floor to Brother Manny De Leon. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Chairman of the First Metro Save and Learn Philippine Index Fund, Inc., Mr. Michael G. Sai, First Metro Consumer Fund on MSCI Philippines IMI, Inc., Mr. Eduardo S. Mendiola, and President of First Metro Save and Learn Money Market Fund, Mr. Eduardo R. Carrion. Good afternoon and welcome to the year 2021 Joint Annual Stockholders Meeting of the following FAMI funds. First Metro Save and Learn Philippine Index Fund, Inc., First Metro Consumer Fund on MSCI Philippines IMI, Inc., First Metro Save and Learn Equity Fund, Inc., First Metro Save and Learn Fixed Income Fund, Inc., First Metro Save and Learn Balance Fund, Inc., First Metro Save and Learn Money Market Fund, Inc., First Metro Save and Learn Dollar Bond Fund, Inc., First Metro Asia Focus Equity Fund, Inc. For the purpose of this meeting, SALFIN, FMCF, SALEF, SALFIF, SALBAP, Money Market Fund, Save and Learn Dollar Bond Fund, and Asia Focus shall be collectively referred to as FAMI funds. In view of the ongoing pandemic situation and the implementation of the community quarantine, the FAMI funds are unable to conduct this year's annual stockholders meeting physically. Instead, our meeting shall be via remote communication with the stockholders participating by electronic means pursuant to the rules of the Securities and Exchange Commission. The meeting will now please come to order. We now go to the certification of notice and quorum. We request the respective chairman of each of the funds to determine if there is a quorum.
Ms. Secretary, have you sent the notice to the stockholders of SALFIN, and is there a quorum for this meeting?
Mr. Chairman, the required notices for SALFIN were duly sent. This is to certify that the notice for the 2021 Annual Stockholders Meeting was published to notify the stockholders of record in the business sections of the Manila Times and the Manila Standard on May 17 and May 18, 2021, in print and online format, and in the FAMI and the company's website in accordance with SEC regulations. There are actually present in person or represented by their proxies by remote communication stockholders holding 69,347,721 common shares out of the 116,580,421 common shares outstanding as of record date on May 5, 2021. This constitutes 59.48% of the outstanding capital, and we have a quorum for the meeting for SALFIN.
Madam Secretary, have you sent the notice to the stockholders of First Metro Consumer Fund? And is there a quorum for this meeting?
Mr. Chairman, the required notices for First Metro Consumer Fund were published. This is certified that the notice of the annual stockholders meeting was published in two newspapers of general circulation on May 17 and May 18, 2021, in print and online format, and in FAMI website in accordance with the SEC regulations. There are actually present in person or by proxies, by remote communication, stockholders holding 68.25% of the outstanding capital stock. We therefore have a quorum, Mr. Chairman. Brother Manny, you're on mute.
Ms. Secretary, have you sent the notice to the stockholders of First Metro Save and Learn Equity Fund, Inc., First Metro Save and Learn Fixed Income Fund, Inc., First Metro Save and Learn Balance Fund, Inc., First Metro Save and Learn Money Market Fund, Inc., First Metro Save and Learn Dollar Bond Fund, Inc., First Metro Asia Focus Equity Fund, Inc.? And is there a quorum for this meeting?
Mr. Chairman, the required notices were duly published, and this is to certify that the said notices for the 2021 annual stockholders meeting were published in two newspapers of general circulation on May 17 and May 18, 2021, in print and online format, and in the FAMI and company's website in accordance with the SEC regulation. There are actually present in person or represented by their proxies by remote communication, stockholders holding the following shares. For SALEF, 51.81% of the outstanding capital stock. For SALFIF, 59.90% of the outstanding capital stock. For SALBAF, 52.53% of the outstanding capital stock. For SALMAF, 56.82% of the outstanding capital stock. For SALDABAF, 69.13% of the outstanding capital stock. And for the Asia Focus Equity Fund, we have 100% of the outstanding capital stock. We therefore have a quorum for each of the FAMI funds mentioned, Mr. Chairman.
There being the required quorum for all the FAMI funds, this joint meeting is therefore duly constituted for the transaction of the business in the fund's respective agenda. Each item for approval in the agenda will appear in your screen, and stockholders participating can cast their vote by clicking the appropriate box. The votes of stockholders who send their duly accomplished forms with votes prior to the meeting will be shown on screen. The additional votes cast online shall be added to the results of preliminary voting. The next item is the approval of the minutes of the stockholders meeting of the FAMI funds held on September 16, 2020. The matters taken up in the said meetings are contained in SEC Form 20, is definitive information statement, and also published in our website. Is there any motion from the floor?
Good afternoon. I am Marie Loribis, stockholder of First Metro Consumer Fund and Save and Learn Philippine Index Fund. Mr. Chairman, I move for the approval of the minutes of the stockholders meeting held on September 16, 2020 for the FAMI funds.
I am Lloyd Laurelia, stockholder of First Metro Consumer Fund and proxy for Angeline Koo, stockholder of SALDABAF. I second the motion.
The host will now launch the poll question. You may cast your vote by clicking on the available options.
Appearing first is the call for Save and Learn Philippine Index Fund. Followed by Save and Learn Equity Fund. Next is Save and Learn Fixed Income Fund. Save and Learn Balance Fund. Save and Learn Dollar Bond Fund. Next is First Metro Asia Focus Equity Fund. First Metro Consumer Fund. And Save and Learn Money Market Fund. The voting will now be closed. Mr. Chairman,
May I now request the corporate secretaries to present the preliminary voting results. Attorney Reyes and Ma'am Ninfa, do we have the preliminary voting results?
Based, based on the preliminary voting results, the following votes were obtained to approve the minutes as follows. For SALEF, 51.81%, SALFI, 59.90%, SALBA, 52.53%, SALDABAF, 69.13%, and for the Asian Focus, 100%. For Consumer Fund, 68.25%, and Money Market Fund, 56.82%.
There being a motion duly made and seconded and the required votes obtained, and there being no objections for the approval of the minutes of the annual stockholders meeting of the FAMI funds held on September 16, 2020, said minutes are approved. The next item in the agenda is the annual report to the stockholders. Ms. Karen Lisa M. Roa, FAMI President, will now render the report on operations and financial condition and the FAMI Fund's performance in 2020. Ma'am Karen?
Thank you very much, Brother Rani, Mr. Chairman. Can we have the slide, please? Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and I would like to present the annual shareholders report for the year 2020 with a bit of comparison for the year 2019, as well as a little bit of an update with regard to the first 5 months of 2021. Next slide. We'll start off with an executive summary, and then we'll provide you the financial highlights of each of the funds, and then we'll give you an analysis of the competition, how our funds have performed versus benchmark as well as peers, and then I will hand you over to our fund manager for the capital market outlook. Next. As a summary, for the total assets under management as of December 2020, we ended the year at 12.12 billion versus December of 2019 at 10.24 billion, or approximately 18% increase year on year. For the first 5 months of the year, we ended 12.366 billion for May 2021, or an increase of about 300 billion from December 2020. With regard to the sales or subscriptions for the full year 2020, we generated a gross sales of 4.4 billion, almost 300% as compared to the same period, December 2019, which ended total subscriptions at 1.094 billion. Total net sales generated for 2020 was approximately 50% or than 50% of the gross sales at 1.986 billion, as compared to a negative 0.273 million for the full year of 2019. For the first 5 months of 2021, our gross sales is 1.845 billion versus less than 1 billion for the same period last year. Net sales is at 795 billion as compared to 322 million for the same period of 2020. Next slide, please. Okay. With regard to our fund performance for 2020, happy to note that we were able to retain our equity position above benchmark and provide better performance as compared to many of our peers, positioning us on the first quartile for our equity funds. Okay. So with that, let me give you a little bit more granularity with regard to the financial highlights of each of the funds. Okay. So the Save and Learn Equity Fund is our actively managed fund. Its total assets stands at 4.192 billion as of December 31, 2020, as compared to December 31, 2019 of 4.142 billion. Total liabilities stood at 70,600,000 for a shareholder equity of 4.122 billion for full year 2020. Liabilities for 2019 stood at 18 million and shareholders equity was at 4.124. Our net asset value per share, we ended 2020 at 4.94, a decline from the previous year of 5.32 on account or decline of 7.3% on account of market values and volatility in the market, as we all know. Next. For the Save and Learn Fixed Income Fund for December 31, 2020, the total assets was at 2,086,000,000. Total liabilities at 104 million for a shareholders equity of 1.982 billion. As compared to 12/31/2019, the shareholders equity was at 1.6 billion or a 23.5% increase year on year. Net asset value for 2020 ended at 2.4532, versus December 31, 2019 net asset value per share of 2.3591 or an increase of about 4%. Next. For the Save and Learn Balance Fund, total assets stood at 1.455 billion. Total liabilities was at 60 million for a shareholder equity of 1.395 billion as of December 31, 2020. As compared to the same period of the previous year, 2019, equity had declined by about 11.7%. Net asset value was at 2.6269 for December 31, 2020, as compared to 2.6315 for the same period of 2019, or a decline of 0.2%. The money market fund total assets was at 1.515. Total liabilities was at 81 million, and the shareholder equity was at 1.434 billion as of December 31, 2020. As compared to the previous year, that was shareholders equity increased by about 241% from its 420 million as of December 31, 2019. Net asset value at the end of 2020 was at 1.0481 as compared to the same period of 2019 at 1.0263, or an increase of about 2.1% for the full year 2020. Next. For the Save and Learn Philippine Index Fund, the total assets stood at 80.918 million. Total liabilities was at 1,075,000, and shareholders equity was at 79,843,000. As compared to the previous year, that was an increase in shareholders equity by about almost 30% from 61,519 to 79,843. Net asset value was at 0.7764 as of December 2020 as compared to 0.85 in 2019, or a decline of negative of 9%. Our First Metro Consumer Fund has had a total assets of 481 million as of December 31, 2020. Its liabilities stood at 1.4 million for a net shareholders equity of 479 million. Okay. There's a slight decline from its previous year. 12/31/2019 ended a shareholders equity at 492 for a decline of about negative 2.6, or for a decline of 2.6%. Net asset value for December 31, 2020 was at 0.74, a decline of about 13% from its previous net asset value as of December 31, 2019 of 0.8493. For the dollar bond fund, this is actually in US dollars. Okay, so, total assets was at 13.091 as of December 31, 2020, 153% increase from the previous year of 5,170,000. The total liabilities as of December 2020 stood at 7.7 million. Shareholders' equity, therefore, was at 5.374 million, or a 4% increase as compared to the 2019 numbers. Net asset value had increased by about 12% from 0.0258 to 0.0289 as of December 31, 2020. The last is our Asia Focus Equity Fund. Total assets is at 4.755, okay, as of December 31, 2020. Okay, a decline of about 100% from its previous level of 172 million in 2019. Total liabilities is at 3.959 for a shareholders equity as of December 31, 2020 of 796,275. Net asset value currently is at 0.3742. The Asia Focus Equity Fund is still an internal fund and launched for sale. Next. The next slide is a comparison of our funds under management versus peers and the benchmark. So the orange line will be the benchmark of the respective funds. Okay? The denominator of the 30, 60, 90, and 120 and year to date and the ranking, the denominator represents the total number of funds that are in that space, and the numerator will be our respective ranking as against the total players in that space. So as mentioned, the net asset value as of April 2021 for the Save and Learn Equity Fund is at 4,111,000,000. Okay. The year-to-date return is negative 5.35%, almost 200% above the benchmark of 7.12, negative 7.12. And therefore giving us, ranking us 4 out of 13 among all of the players. The consumer fund, as of May 31, has a total net asset value of 447 million, also outperforming the benchmark, and currently ranked on the top quartile out of 13 players, ranked as the number 3. So all of our actively managed funds have been performing very well, outperforming the benchmark, and placing on the top quartile among all of the actively managed equity funds in the mutual fund space. For the index funds, we have 2 index funds. We have the only First Metro Philippine ETF. This is the only ETF in the country. The current net asset value stands at 1.8 billion or 1.9 billion. And as you will see, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and 120 days, including the year to date, it has been outperforming the benchmark. Currently, it's generating a return of negative 6.53 as compared to the benchmark of negative 7.38, ranked number 1 among all index funds in the country. The First Metro Save and Learn Philippine Index Fund has only about 75 million and quite lagging in terms of the returns, okay, because of also the size, a little bit difficult in terms of having to track the index and actively, rebalance the fund. The balance fund, there are 2 balance funds under the First Metro umbrella. We've got the First Metro Save and Learn Balance Fund. Net asset value stands at 1.320 billion, okay, generating a return of negative 3.57, pretty much at par with the benchmark at negative 3.59. The benchmark of the balance fund is a 50% composite index of 50% PSEI and the fixed income blended benchmark of about 50% as well. And then we also have the First Metro Save and Learn Focus Dynamic Fund. This has a portfolio size of 30 million and generating a return year to date ending May 31 of negative 4.48. Moving on to the fixed income funds, we have the First Metro Save and Learn Fixed Income Fund. This is denominated in pesos. The total net asset value is 1.9 billion, okay, generating a return year to date ending May 31 of negative 0.84 and quite behind the benchmark of 0.20%. For the foreign currency securities, we have $1 bond fund, the First Metro Save and Learn Dollar Bond Fund, with a total net asset value in pesos of 707 million, generating a return year to date of negative 2.63. And then lastly, we have the money market fund. This fund was launched last 2019 in January. It now has a 1.5 billion net asset value, generating a return as of May 31, 2021 of 0.36%, outperforming the benchmark by about 20 basis points, and the benchmark being the Bloomberg Philippine Sovereign Bond Index Money Market. There is the performance versus the benchmark and performance and the ranking in terms of as compared to the peers. This next slide will just identify each of the players in that space. No? So we mentioned that there were about 13 players in the save and learn in the stock in the equity space. So these define also those 13. We included also some of the UITFs in here just so that we see how we are faring compared to both mutual funds and the UITFs. So the ones in blue highlight or light blue is the First Metro Consumer Fund as well as the First Metro Save and Learn Fund. And as mentioned earlier, it's being ranked on the top quartile. So there's 3 and 4 respectively. Okay. Next. This is the index trackers, okay, which we reported earlier. So this is the total number of index trackers out in the market, okay, and how we are comparing and who they are and how we compare as versus them. Okay. The next slide is also how we stack up against the balance funds. Okay, there are 9 balance funds in the mutual fund space, and our Save and Learn Balance Fund is on the top quartile. However, our Save and Learn Focus Dynamic Fund is on the bottom quartile. Next. The fixed incomes, Save and Learn Fixed Income, as I mentioned, is generating a return of negative 0.84. Okay. Above the benchmark is the BP Philippines 60%, and then also 30%. I think this is a savings, and then we have the PSA for about 10%. The bottom row will reflect the benchmark, which is at negative 145, and we are outperforming the benchmark by about 45, about 50 basis points. Okay. And if you'll notice also, players are pretty much close together in terms of the year-to-date returns. Okay. Next. Thank you. The dollar bond fund, 707 million pesos, the equivalent, okay, generating a return of negative 2.63, ranking as 6 out of 8 players in the dollar bond fund space of the mutual funds. All right. Okay. And finally, the money market fund. As mentioned, the money market fund has a total net asset value size of 1.554 billion, generating a return of 0.36. The benchmark is the Bloomberg Philippine Sovereign Bond Index Fund, okay, performing slightly, below benchmark. Okay, however, out of the money market funds out there, we are outperforming many of our peers. I think that ends the performance numbers. So the next one is just a historical picture of the movement of the prices from inception. So allow me to just walk you through it. The first slide or the first chart on the left is how the net asset value per share or the price of the SALEF has moved over the last 15 years. So when we launched it, it was slightly above 1 peso. Currently, it's about 5 or 4 pesos. Okay. The chart on the right is the First Metro Consumer Fund, which was launched in 2018. So this one is a picture of how the price has performed over the last 3 years. Just as a little bit of an anecdote, no? The equity performance the index performance over the last 5 years has been relatively flat. No? So that's why similarly you'll see that except for those times that we've outperformed, you'll see that it is a little bit flat for the SALIF and the consumer fund over the last 3-4 years. Next. This is the ETF. So this is pretty much an exact tracker of the index. So this will show you that since it was launched in 2014 up to today, 2021, this has been the performance of the index and similarly our own ETF. So very much mirroring the performance and the behavior of the index over the last 5 years, 6 years. Southern, also our equity fund, okay, launched in 2013, the last 7 years. So this has been the trajectory or the trend of the net asset value per share. Moving on to the balance funds. Okay, so the balance funds has a composite of about a benchmark of about 50-50 equity and fixed income. Okay, so given that, then this one will mirror a little bit of the fixed income and as well as the equity fund. So this is the net asset value. The balance fund was launched in 2007. So this is about a 14-year NAVPS performance picture. Focus, meanwhile, was launched in 2019. So over the last 3 years, okay, we see some dips and some throws. Okay. Thank you. Next slide. And for the fixed income, so the one on the left is the peso fixed income fund, launched in May 2006. The historical NAVPS reflects an upward trajectory for the fixed income over the last 15 years. Meanwhile, for the dollar bond fund, okay, from 2014, you'll see some upward trends overall over the last 7 years. And finally, for our Save and Learn Money Market Fund, as mentioned, this was launched in January of 2019, and it continues to just, increase in its value, and it reflects an upward trend or an upward trajectory over the last 3 years. That's our short-term fund. Okay. Just for the information of our shareholders, we're happy to note that we've seen a 20% increase in our social media reach. We are now combined 96,000 between our Facebook, our Twitter, our Instagram, YouTube, Viber, and email subscribers. Okay? As we all know, online, digital is the way that it's moving. I don't think it's going to be changing. So we need to keep track on how far our reach has been over the last couple of months and in fact much of our marketing, advertising, and sales initiatives are all driven by online platforms such as these. Okay. I think that's it. Okay. At this point, I'd like to hand you over to our fund manager, Edser Trinidad, to provide you an outlook or what to expect in the days or months to come with regard to the market. Thank you very much. Edser, all yours.
Thank you, Ms. Roa. The report is noted. Due to logistical limitations of the meeting conducted virtually, open forum discussion will not be possible during the meeting. However, a stockholder will be given opportunity to raise any relevant questions or express an appropriate comment limited to the annual report by sending an email to asm@fami.com.ph. Any relevant Questions or comment received via email shall be properly acknowledged, noted, and addressed accordingly. Mr. Edser Trinidad, First Vice President and Head of Investment and Research Unit of FAMI, will now render the report on market outlook.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon to shareholders. In my presentation, it will basically be in three parts. I'll be providing you what happened, at least for the first 5 months, and basically what is our expectation for the rest of the year, and what are the appropriate strategies that we have been deploying in order to go with the situation. In terms of the equities market, after some continued decline the first 4 months, the BSCI has turned a corner as it gained by about 4% during May. However, the market is still down on a year-to-date basis, as it is down by about 4.8% as of June 4. The question is, all of a sudden, how come there's basically an improvement in the sentiment is due to the following reasons. First, there has been a slowdown in COVID cases, and the stabilization of inflation had eased concerns in both the fixed income and the equities market. The decent first quarter corporate earnings has also given some improvement in terms of the sentiment, considering that the corporates were able to come up with good results despite a lockdown that happened during March. And aside from that, we have been improving in terms of our vaccination rate, and that has also improved to the market sentiment. And as you can see here, in terms of the fixed income market, during the first quarter, we've seen that yields have been up aggressively, considering that inflation has been faster than expected. The rise in U.S. Treasuries has also not helped in easing the continuing rise. And in addition, with the government funding, aggressive funding requirements, the Bureau of Treasury is awarding the new papers at a higher bids. So these are basically the reasons why yields went up aggressively during the first quarter. However, in the second quarter, we've seen some yields easing off a bit due to the inflation has already been addressed in terms of the factors that led to high inflation. U.S. Treasury yields have stabilized. Another important thing is the markets remains highly liquid, and considering that the expectations of growth it remains to be challenged in both here as well as in the U.S. Due to this, both our central bank, the BSP, and the Fed, in the U.S. Fed, have continuing to go with their accommodative stance. I think in terms of first half, we expect that the market will trade on a tight reach, considering that, first of all, it has enjoyed a strong run during the past couple of weeks. We may be seeing some consolidation as investors are waiting for new catalyst. But however, for second half, we expect that this will be a period of recovery due to the following reasons. First, governments are expected to increase their spending due to the run-up of the 2022 national elections. The vaccine rollout has been gaining momentum, and as we continue to increase our vaccination rate, this may lead to further reopening of the economy. Due to this, expectations of a strong recovery by 2022 is currently high, and this is the reason why a lot of investors are now positioning for 2022 recovery plays. For the fixed income market, we expect that yields will continue to trade sideways until inflation will fall back within BSP's target. As you can see here in this chart, this is a year-to-date basis in terms of foreign inflows. As you can see, for most of the so far for most of the months of the year, we've seen a lot of net fund selling that happened. However, what is notable is during the last part of May, there has been an uptick in terms of foreign activity, and this and considering that we really have a very low foreign ownership level among Philippine companies. So any foreign inflow would have a big impact in terms of our market. And as you can see here on this chart, this is the PSEI chart. Because of the inflows that we've seen in the previous slide, during the last week of May, there has been a surge in terms of the market performance. However, despite of that strong performance, we're still lagging in terms of a year-to-date return. As you can see here, we still generate about, this is as of June 4, a negative 4.8% growth. This is one of the worst, or it's the worst among the markets listed here. However, as you can see here, even our neighbors have started to experience a contraction in their respective market because of concerns of a surge in COVID infections. I think one of the main reasons why sentiment had improved in our market is, as you can see here, the number of COVID cases have been slowing down. And as a result, this has improved sentiment considering that the government has started to ease the quarantine restrictions here in Metro Manila and its neighboring cities. Metro Manila and the neighboring cities accounts for a big portion of our economy. So any relaxation on restriction should be good for our economy. And in addition, a lot of investors, foreign investors also realize that we're not basically facing the same problem in controlling the surge of COVID cases. And as you can see here, countries such as Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand are also now experiencing their own surge of COVID infections. Another thing that has also eased the concerns on both equities and fixed income markets are basically the inflation has started to stabilize. The government's effort to bring down the cost of pork has significantly helped in stabilizing food inflation. If this trend will continue, then there might be a possibility that the yields may improve. However, we are cautiously guarding our position and our expectation, considering that aside from food inflation, fuel prices have started to pick up. So that's another event that we need to look closely at. And another thing that has also kept yields in check is because of the strong liquidity flows that's coming in our economy. As such, this is the reason why yields were able to, the rising yields were kept in check. And as you can see here, in this chart shows you the trend of the interest rates. This is the current level of yields starting from the 1 month duration until the 25-year duration. And as you're going to compare this during the end of the year of 2020, it has risen considerably. However, as I mentioned, due to the liquidity and the stabilization of inflation, yields have somewhat, or rather, have somewhat improved as compared with our meetings about 2 months ago. And as you can see here, this is the last time in terms of inflation of yield. I believe this is as of April or March. However, as of June 4, it's started to ease, as mentioned, because the market is awash with liquidity. And in addition, the BSP is also uh, or has also maintained its accommodative stance. So in that way, it has eased concerns of a potential increase in policy rates, and that's the reason why yields have eased a bit during the past couple of weeks. However, we're still very cautious about the fixed income market, and as you can see here, this is basically the relation between the inflation and the 10-year bonds. And as you can see on the chart, historically, the 10-year bond has a significant gap as compared to the inflation. However, right now, 10-year bonds are trading, the yields are trading below than that of inflation. So this is the reason why, because of this, the market remains defensive on the long bonds and are awaiting for better levels. And in addition, the U.S. Treasuries, there's also expectation that they might rise by second half, considering that the U.S. recovery is underway, and there are some fears that inflation, because of a stronger demand, may push inflation in the U.S. And this is the reason why market players in U.S. Treasuries are now taking up at higher yield as compared to last year's level. However, this is basically the latest data that were able to gather, and this is one of the main reasons why market sentiment has improved considerably. Because after some concerns that we're lagging behind in terms of vaccination, there are now strong indications that the government now has secured vaccines to inoculate at least 80% of its population. And as you can see here on the chart, a big number of or bulk of these orders of vaccines will start to arrive by second half. And this is the reason why a lot of investors are trying to anticipate a further recovery of the economy. And this is one of the main reasons why we are quite confident that by second half, the equities market is expected to further recover because of this expectation. This is basically a chart that shows you the estimated arrival of vaccines and the cumulative or number of vaccines per new arrival. And because of those expectations, the market is now projecting a stronger economic, or rather a stronger EPS growth. As you can see here, as compared to the previous survey that we gathered, earnings were adjusted upwards, and as a result, EPS growth is expected to grow by about 39.5 as compared to the previous estimate of about 38.9. And what is quite also notable is for 2022, because of the reopening of the economy, they're expecting a faster or higher EPS growth. And as you can see here, from an EPS growth of 2022 from 20.7, it is expected that the adjusted estimate is now at about 22.9. However, if you also look at the GDP growth for 2021, you're seeing that while 2021 has been adjusted downwards because of the lockdown that we had experienced in March, for 2022, they're expecting a faster economic growth because of the reasons that I stated a while back. And this is basically the rest of the macro outlook. For our strategy for the equities market for first half, what we had done is we have maintained a high cash position and we're focusing on low beta stocks. Low beta stocks means that they're not volatile relative to what's happening in the market. And we're also maintaining a high degree of active and alpha bets. Alpha bets are those names or stocks that or regardless of economic situation, the earnings growth are expected to be strong. For second half, we're going, because of our expectations of a stronger market, we are going to increase our equity exposure, although we've already done this starting the last week of May, considering that we've seen some strong inflows coming from foreign investors. We've also, and all the strategies we've already starting to employ. We've already also increased our weights on the cyclical stocks and beneficiaries of the reopening of the economy. However, once these names have already reached their maximum value, we're also looking at switching to value plays, as we expect that people will start to look at those stocks that have lagged relative to the market's performance, but in terms of fundamentals, they present a very solid outlook. For the fixed income, we're still going to maintain a heavy weight on the belly securities, which is basically those securities that are between 5 year to 7 years duration. And we're also staying neutral or close to the benchmark's duration. What are the risks to our outlook? These are basically the risks that may affect our outlook for the rest of the year. The number one risk is the resurgence of COVID cases. And we've seen this happen in March. Although in Metro Manila, cases have started to slow down. There are some pocket surges outside of Manila. And this is one thing that we really need to look closely at. A potential spike in inflation due to the rise in fuel and commodity prices, and above average damages due to calamities. And lastly, political noises. That ends my presentation, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Trinidad. The report is noted. We now move to the next item in the agenda, which is the ratification of all acts and resolutions of the Board of Directors and Management and all committees for the fiscal year 2020 of FAMI funds, including the following. Renewal of the FAMI funds management distribution agreement with FAMI. Is there any motion from the floor?
I move.
Okay, there's a motion. Yeah.
I am Ingrid Cruz, proxy for Mary Pines Crest Antonio, stockholder of Salef First Metro Consumer Fund and Save and Learn Balance Fund. Mr. Chairman, I move that all acts, transactions, and resolutions of the Board of Directors and Management and all committees of FAMI funds for the fiscal year 2020, including the renewal of the management and distribution agreement with FAMI, and the minutes of meeting of the board and board committees be ratified and confirmed.
I am Eman Lagrimas, stockholder of FMCF and proxy for Diana Tolentino, stockholder of FMCF. I second the motion.
The host will now launch the poll question. You may cast your vote by clicking on the available options.
We are now opening the voting poll. The voting will now be closed. Mr. Chairman,
May I now request the corporate secretaries to present the preliminary voting results?
Based on the preliminary voting results of Save and Learn Philippine Index Fund, 59.48% voted in favor of the ratification of all acts and transactions of the board and the management in 2020. None voted against, and there are no abstentions.
Based on the preliminary voting results of the following based on the preliminary voting results, the following votes were obtained for the ratification of all acts and transactions of the board and the management in 2020 for the following funds: SALEF 51.81%, SALFI 59.9%, SALBA 52.53%, SALDABA 69.13%, Asia Focus Equity Fund 100%, Consumer Fund 68.25%, Money Market Fund 56.82%. None voted against, and there are no abstentions.
There being a motion duly made and seconded, and the required votes obtained to ratify all acts and resolutions of the Board of Directors, Management, and all committees of the FAMI funds for the fiscal year 2020, including the renewal of the management and distribution agreement, and the minutes of meetings of the board and the committees of the respective funds, the motion is carried. May I request the chairman of the FMCF, Mr. Eduardo S. Menjola, to present the next item pertaining to the First Metro Consumer Fund.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We now move to the next item on the agenda, the amendment of, which is the amendment of the Articles of Incorporation of First Metro Consumer Fund on MSCI Philippines. May we request the Corporate Secretary to explain the amendments submitted to the stockholders?
The Board of Directors, during its special meeting on June 3, 2021, approved the amendment of the Article 7B of the Articles of Incorporation of First Metro Consumer Fund on MSCI Philippines IMI Inc. to delete the phrase, provided, however, that no such redemption may be made unless the remaining unimpaired capital of the corporation shall be at least 50% of its outstanding liabilities to the creditors of the corporation. The amendment is consistent with the provisions of the Investment Company Act and its implementing rules and regulations. We are submitting this to the stockholders for ratification. For the amendment of the Articles of Incorporation, the vote of stockholders holding at least 2/3 of the outstanding capital stock is required. And this is also to report that the Board of Directors unanimously approved the amendments to the bylaws to conform to the provisions of the revised Corporation Code and the Investment Company Act, as well as its implementing rules and regulations. The Board of Directors is empowered to amend, modify, or alter the bylaws upon majority vote.
Thank you. Is there any motion from the floor?
Good afternoon. I am Ruth Chaneco, stockholder of First Metro Consumer Fund. Mr. Chairman, I move for the ratification of the amendment of Article 7B of the Articles of Incorporation of Consumer Fund as approved by the board, and note the amendments to the bylaws approved by the board.
I second the motion.
The host will now launch the poll question. You may cast your vote by clicking on the available options.
The voting is now open for First Metro Consumer Fund. The voting will now be closed. Mr. Chairman,
May I now request the Corporate Secretary to present the preliminary voting results?
Based on the preliminary voting results of First Metro Consumer Fund, Inc., 68.25% of the stockholders voted to ratify the amendment to the Article of Incorporation. None voted against, and there are no abstentions.
Ed?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. There being a motion duly made and seconded, and the required votes obtained for the ratification of the amendment to the Articles of Incorporation, and there being no objections, the motion is carried.
Next in the agenda is the election of the members of the Board of Directors of the FAMI funds to serve for the year 2021-2022. Mr. Michael G. Sai, Chairman of the Nomination Committee of SALFIN, will now explain the nomination procedure under the current SEC rules on behalf of the FAMI funds. The rules apply to all the funds. Mr. Michael Sai, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, in compliance with the requirements of Securities and Exchange Commission, as well as the FAMI Mutual Funds Manual on Corporate Governance, the nomination committee of the FAMI Mutual Funds was tasked with the review and evaluation of the qualification of all persons nominated to the board. Pursuant to the mandate, the nomination committee of each of the funds reviewed the qualification of the following nominees to the board of directors and certifies that based on the records, they have all the qualifications and none of the disqualifications prescribed by law and regulations. The list of nominees for each of the FAMI funds is contained in a definitive information statement sent to all stockholders and submitted to the SEC prior to today's meeting. The nominees for the First Metro Save and Learn Philippine Index Fund, Inc. are as follows: Mr. Michael G. Sai, Mr. Robert T. Yu, Mr. Winston Andrew L. Pexon, Father Roderick Salazar Jr., and Mr. Jose Alan I. Arellano. Father Roderick Salazar Jr., SVD, and Mr. Jose Alan Arellano are nominees for independent directors, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, the nominees for the First Metro Consumer Fund on MSCI Philippines Incorporated are as follows: Mr. Eduardo S. Mendiola, Mr. Robert T. Yu, Mr. Michael G. Sai, Ms. Rodora Angela F. Ferrer, Father Rafael K. Iloriaga, Ms. Rodora Angela F. Ferrer, and Father Rafael K. Iloriaga are nominees for independent directors. The nominees for the First Metro Save and Learn Equity Fund Incorporated are as follows: Brother Manuel V. De Leon, Dr. Victor A. Abola, Mr. Eduardo S. Mendiola, Father Rafael K. Iloriaga, Mr. Edgar B. Solilapsi. Father Rafael K. Iloriaga and Mr. Solilapsi are nominees for independent directors. The nominees for the First Metro Save and Learn Fixed Income Fund are as follows: Brother Manuel B. De Leon, Dr. Victor A. Abola, Mr. Eduardo S. Mendiola, Father Rafael K. Iloriaga, Mr. Edgar B. Solilapsi. Father Rafael K. Iloriaga and Mr. Solilapsi are nominees for independent director. The nominees for the First Metro Save and Learn Balance Fund Incorporated are as follows: Brother Manuel V. De Leon, Dr. Victor A. Abola, Mr. Eduardo S. Mendiola, Ms. Bernadette M. Nepomuceno, Ms. Rodora Angela F. Ferrer, Ms. Bernadette M. Nepomuceno, and Ms. Rodora Angela F. Ferrer are nominees for independent director. The nominees for the First Metro Save and Learn Dollar Bond Fund Incorporated are as follows: Brother Manuel V. De Leon, Mr. Eduardo S. Mendiola, Father of Roderick C. Salazar Jr., Ms. Bernadette M. Nepomuceno, Ms. Rodora Angela F. Ferrer. Father Roderick C. Salazar Jr., Ms. Bernadette M. Nepomuceno, Ms. Rodora Angela F. Ferrer are nominees for independent directors. The nominees for the First Metro Asia Focus Equity Fund Incorporated are as follows: Brother Manuel V. De Leon, Mr. Eduardo S. Mendiola, Mr. Michael G. Sai, Father Roderick C. Salazar Jr., Ms. Bernadette M. Nepomuceno. Father Roderick C. Salazar Jr. and Ms. Bernadette M. Nepomuceno are nominees for independent directors. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Nominees for the First Metro Save and Learn Money Market Fund, Inc. are as follows: Mr. Michael Sai, Mr. Eduardo Carrion, Mr. Edgar Solilapsi, Father Rafael Eloriaga, Mr. Jose Alan Arellano, Father Roderick Salazar, Dr. Bernard Villegas. Dr. Bernard Villegas, Mr. Edgar Solilapsi, Father Rafael Eloriaga, Mr. Jose Alan Arellano, and Father Roderick Salazar are nominees for independent directors. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is there any motion from the floor?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the nominees enumerated by the Nomination Committee Chairman member be declared elected to the respective Board of Directors of the FAMI funds so named.
I am Marge Roselis, stockholder of Save and Learn Equity Fund and Save and Learn Fixed Income Fund, and proxy for Evangeline Roselis, stockholder of Save and Learn Money Market Fund. I second the motion.
The host will now launch the poll question. You may cast your vote by clicking on the available options.
Appearing first is the poll for Save and Learn Philippine Index Fund. Followed by Save and Learn Equity Fund. Next is Save and Learn Fixed Income Fund. Save and Learn Balance Fund. Next is Save and Learn Dollar Bond Fund. First Metro Asia Focus Equity Fund. Next is First Metro Consumer Fund. And Save and Learn Money Market Fund. The voting will now be closed. Mr. Chairman,
May I now request the corporate secretaries to present the preliminary voting results?
Based on the preliminary voting results of SALFIN, 59.48% voted in favor of the election of all the nominees. None voted against, and there are no abstentions. Thank you.
Based on the preliminary voting results, the following votes were obtained to elect all the nominees to each of the following funds: SALEF, 51.81%; SALFIF, 59.90%; SALBAF, 52.53%; SALDABAF, 69.13%; Asia Focus, 100%; Consumer Fund, 68.25%; and Money Market Fund, 56.82%. None voted against, and there are no abstentions.
Let it be on record that upon nominations duly made and there being no other nominations, the stockholders of the FAMI funds enumerated by Mr. Michael G. Sai, Mr. Eduardo S. Menjola, and Mr. Eduardo R. Carrion were unanimously elected to serve on the respective boards. We are very grateful to our incumbent directors for their continuing invaluable service to the board. Finally, on behalf of the board, may I express gratitude to our valued stockholders for your steadfast loyalty over the years and for your faith and confidence. While unusual times are upon us, we shall, with your support, face the challenges with hope, anchored in divine providence and with faith in the company's long-standing values of dedication and hard work. It is our honor and privilege to serve you and this esteemed institution. The next item on the agenda is the appointment of an independent external auditor for the fiscal year 2021. The Audit Committee of the FAMI Funds, in its meeting held on June 10, 2021, had approved the appointment of SGV and Company as the independent external auditor. We now submit this for your ratification. For the ratification of the appointment of SGV and Company, the majority vote of the stockholders is required. Is there any motion from the floor?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the appointment of CSIP Gores, Velayo and Company as the independent external auditor of the FAMI funds be ratified.
I second the motion.
The host will now launch the poll question. You may cast your vote by clicking on the available options.
we will now open the voting for the appointment of external auditor. The voting will now be closed. Mr. Chairman,
May I now request the corporate secretaries to present the preliminary voting results?
Based on the preliminary voting results of SALFIN, 59.48% voted in favor of the appointment of SGV and Company as the independent external auditor. None voted against, and there are no abstentions.
Based on the preliminary voting results, the following votes were obtained for the approval of the appointment of SGV and Company in the following funds: SALEF, 51.81%; SALFIF, 59.90%; Salba 52.53%, Saldaba 69.13%, Asia Focus Equity Fund 100%, Consumer Fund 68.25%, Money Market Fund 56.82%. None voted against and there are no abstentions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
There being a motion duly made and seconded on the required votes obtained, the appointment of SGB and Company as independent external auditor of the FAMI funds for the fiscal year 2021 is hereby ratified. Are there any other matters to be taken up?
Mr. Chairman, there are no other matters for consideration of the stockholders of Salfin. Thank you.
None, Mr. Chairman. There are no other matters for consideration of the stockholders of the rest of the funds. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Stockholders may raise any relevant questions or express an appropriate comment limited to the agenda by sending an email to asm@fami.com.ph. Any relevant questions or comment received via email shall be properly acknowledged, noted, and addressed accordingly. If there are no other matters for the approval of the stockholders, we can now adjourn the meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the meeting of FAMI Mutual Funds be adjourned.
I second the motion.
There being no other matters to consider, the year 2021 annual stockholders meeting of the FAMI funds are hereby adjourned. Thank you for your participation.
That ends our discussion for this year's annual stockholders meeting of the FAMI Mutual Funds. Again, you may send relevant questions or comments limited to the annual report by sending an email to asm@fami.com.ph. Thank you and have a pleasant afternoon.
When was the last time you did something for the first time? You remember that feeling of hesitation. Maybe you're not ready. Perhaps you're not good enough. You doubt yourself. It's a long road ahead. And right now you think, safe is a good place to be. You take a step back, but in doing so, you see the whole picture. You remember the stakes you were brave enough to take. So you shout at the unknown no longer, because you are your own master. You rise up because you know you're not alone. Because you stand on the shoulders of the ones before you. And through them you realize you are more afraid of not trying than failing. They hold your hand, lead you to the peak of your potential. And once on top, you take the leap and do it. The first time you flew and tasted freedom. The first time you went the extra mile and never looked back. The first time you understood that something so small could change the course of your future. The first time you put yourself first. At First Metro Asset, we value you and your achievements. As we navigate through this better normal together, we are here to help you cherish your firsts and make those moments last.